Welcome to Chapter 15, Security Breaches and the Law. Access control exists of reducing to access control exists to reduce the risk and unauthorization of access to valuable information resources. The consequences of unauthorized access can be serious: loss of reputation, financial losses, and even the loss of military or infrastructure resources are compromised. In this chapter, we will discover the ways that compromised access control can result in security breaches. You'll also discover the legal implementations. So what are our topics? U.S. and federal laws, the cost of inadequate access control, how access control fails, the security breach is what we're going to be looking at. So let's look at laws to deter theft. Espionage between organizations used to require a physical act, such as stealing paper documents and making physical copies. Identify theft that was a factor only if someone lost a wallet or if it was stolen. Although the information, federal and state laws have been created to act as deterrents to information theft. These laws require organizations to take steps to protect the sensitive data stored, processed, and transmitted by their IT infrastructures. These laws are considered with which the organization must comply. Organizations must protect data from breaches. They must also be able to tell if the information has been breached or has occurred. So, federal law. The technology breakthroughs of the information age have allowed organizations to be more productive and automated many interactions with consumers and stakeholders through the internet. This has been unfortunate drawbacks. Various regulations define an organization's obligation to secure information. So we're going to take a look at this Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. We have Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is a federal criminal statute designed to protect electronic data from theft. It was enacted in 1984 and designed to protect classified information maintained on governmental computer systems as well as financial. In 1996, Congress expanded the act to cover computer-used interstate commerce. Obtaining information from a computer through unauthorized access, trafficking in a computer password that is intentionally damaging computer data, and stealing. So this is what the law protects. The Digital Millennium Act of 1998 implemented legislation that facilitates the United States Principle World Intelligent Property Organization Treaty. The Act has two major provisions of interest to IT professionals. First, it must make it a crime to bypass technology mechanisms used to enforce copyright provisions or sell equipment designed to bypass mechanisms. Second, it introduces requirements for internet service providers to receive and respond to copyright infringement complaints. Copyright technology protection prohibits the unauthorized disclosure of data by circumventing an establishment technology. Measure of organization. Technology measures include things like product key for software, CD and DVD copies, system passwords, and so on. Let's see. The ISP requirement is also the internet service provider received and respond to copyright complaints in a timely manner. State laws. All states now have laws that apply to unauthorized access to confidential information. Because they have so many parts in common, the section covers one in depth. California. California identity theft statute requires businesses operating in California to notify customers when the business has Reason to believe the information has been stolen. Personal information is defined as social security numbers, driver's license, physical address maintained. Any person who, with the intent to defraud, acquire, transfer, or retains possessions of personal identifying businesses are required to take reasonable steps to destroy all records containing personal information. Business and government agencies must notify individuals when anything is hacked. Cost of inadequate front door or first layer access control. Computer systems and data are essential in our modern lives. The safeguards of securing these assets are both logical and physical. Many times the needs for physical security in a computing environment is overlooked. Unauthorized access is sensitivity, data, and physical access can create a significant risk for the organization. All physical security must comply with the applicable regulations such as building and fire codes. Access to secure computing facilities will be granted only to individuals with legitimate business needs. All secure computing information allow this. Visitors must be escorted at all times. Access control failures. Every organization has sensitive areas for information that should be protected. If the information is left unsecured, it is hard to claim the access is unauthorized. Most responsible organizations implement some type of access control. People, even the most strict and thorough access control policies are prone to human error. This is vividly demonstrated in 2010 when a Virginia couple slipped past security into a state dinner at White House. The couple was subjected to all the normal security screenings procedure, but it was never a threat. But they were not on the guest list. They got it due to human error. Well, outside the network, the team didn't have access to the systems. Rogue internal operatives. Another aspect and human factor of access control is a rogue internal operatives. Disgruntled employees can pose as a major threat to information securities in the form of threat, sabotage, vandalism, and more. The best way to handle these threats is by embracing the least privileged that we talked about. Other related threats, phishing and spearing. These are emails and websites crafted to trick users into installing malicious software. Poor physical security, a hard drive, a flash drive that might be left, physical stored passwords on a slip of paper, file sharing or social networks, group that. The best way to handle the human element is the access control is through training. Every employee must go through it. Technology offers the best but can be bypassed due to failure in technology. No computer system is bug-free. Anything from the organization operating system is a choice in a web browser, instant messaging, and something like that. Windows operating systems prior to Windows Vista had the possibility of running very weak password encryption, but that has gotten much better. Radio frequency identification badges can be used to vector unauthorized personnel. A malicious software user could use an inexpensive reader to pull information of an ID. Privacy impact assessment is a comprehensive process for determining the privacy, confidentiality, and security risks associated with collection use. And this, identify the key factors involved in PII, emphasize the process used in that secure, have a sufficient degree of information from the project, have a degree, and integrate that. Security breaches. Information security breaches take many forms. They include lost and misplaced data, stolen laptops and cell phones, hacked systems, data lost and stolen in transit, information taken by rogue employees, and more. Tangible damage. is calculated based on estimates of lost business, lost productivity, labor, material cost, and repair the breach. What kind of security breaches are we looking at? System exploits. These include Trojan horses, computer viruses, and other malicious code. Eavesdropping. This is the act of passively gathering information. Eavesdropping can take form of sniffing networks and wireless traffic. Social engineering. This is the exploitation of human nature and human error, as discussed previously. Denial of service attack. These are purely damaging attacks meant to render the system unusable. Indirect attacks. These involve using third-party systems to launch an attack. Physical attacks. These range from technology aspects of unauthorized access. Why do security breaches occur? Either for money or vandalism. Financial gains takes numerous intruders to go through it, and monetary gain. Vandalism is just a major part of security breaches. This can be harmless, as kids having fun or trying to make the name for themselves, among other things. Implications of a security breach. Computer secure is a critical issue for any organization. Breaches of systems of security that damages the organization's computer systems can result in financial cost, loss, and penalties. There is no possibility of ongoing security issues due to intruders build themselves some backdoor access. The impact of the breach can be significant. The credit card processing company called Acme Credit Card Processing received notice from two of their larger card issuers that fraudulent credit card purchasing are occurring. Prior to receiving the notification, Acme did not know. After some investigation, the problem discovered that Acme Systems, a spyware program, was loaded onto Acme's system that originated with a spear phishing attack. A well-crafted email was sent to an employee who clicked on the link and infected the system with malicious software. The malicious program was able to pull credit card information. Financial breaches. As discussed above, the cost of security breaches to the organization can come both direct and indirect. They come from equipment replacement costs. And we can look at TJ Maxx, New York Times, Equifax. There's just a bunch that have happened, and you can look those up. So now we have an understanding of the impact of security breaches and how the attackers often combine several attack vectors in a single breach incident. You'll be able to design your access control to mitigate these. You'll be more likely to underestimate weak attacks. Welcome to our last week. Let's just have an overview of what we covered over the last couple months. So we started with the basic framework. What is access control? What are some of the things we have to look at, and how does it communicate to the business world? So we looked at authentication as a process. We have to make sure we log in, that we check to make sure that's who the user is, authentication factors. We've looked at the process itself. We looked at the business requirements. What is required by the business? This is usually designed up by the top level management, and we're going to look at that. We also discovered classification, the different levels, from the government top secret to the businesses as confidential. And we want to make sure that whoever uses these information understands the classifications and follow them, because they're there for a reason. They usually protect company secrets or government secrets that we don't want the general public to know, because it could hurt our business. You know, think about if Coca-Cola gave away their signature formula. Well, they would not stay in business too long. So these are the things that companies need to look at. We looked at the human nature. Now, we could have the best access controls in the world, have the highest and latest technology, and it could simply come down to Someone making a phone call, calling up an employee and saying, I'm from IT, I need your login and password, and they give it. So human engineering and human element is extremely vulnerable, and we need to train our employees more. We need to have ongoing training. It's not a one-shot deal. We continually train them. Some of the other things that make sure that we have human nature under control is, is possibly forced vacations. Maybe they have to take 2 weeks off in a row, especially in the accounting department, where fraud could occur. If they're off for several weeks, things tend to surface. Separations of duties. You don't have multiple people, or you don't have one person making sure everything is done. You have multiple signatures required and some other stuff on that. Also, job rotation is a really good thing. You rotate people through every couple of months. This way they get to know everything about the business, but they can also detect fraud, or it can prevent fraud because they're not at it long enough. But when it comes to employees, the biggest and most important thing we have to do is train them. And that is something we have to look at. Also, ethics. And this comes down from top down. We can look at Enron and WorldCom, Wells Fargo. If the top of the company doesn't have ethics, it's going to filter down and destroy the company and the environment. If you look at what WorldCom and Enron did to the whole economy when they were burning Madoff, these are some of the things that we have to make sure we fight. Assessing risk. As we talked about this entire class, even during, there's risk everywhere. We can't prevent risk. There's risk from getting up and taking a shower. Well, there's risks on everything that we do. If we have a network on the internet, a computer on the internet, it's at risk. We need to protect it. But first, we need to identify that risk. What is that risk, and what is it likely to do to us? We have threats and vulnerabilities. Threat is an outside hacker trying to get into us. A vulnerability is something within our application. Maybe there's a program. That's why we want to make sure we do updates, and we force updates on people, especially when it comes to the Windows world. Windows is constantly finding bugs and backdoors, and we got to get those updates in. So we got to understand that risk happens. We identify it. We make contingency plans, whether it's not building a server down in a server room in Miami where it could be hit by a hurricane, or in Tennessee where it's Hurricane Alley. You want to build your servers where they're safe. Avoid risks. If that's where you do business and that's your only location, that's different. But if you're a country, worldwide organization, you want to put it in the best location where it's going to have the least amount of disruptions. Now, if you look at the enterprise, well, if we're dealing with enterprise systems, we have access control lists, access control entries, and we want to make sure that we give the users the least access they need to perform their job. There's no reason for an employee to have manager's access if he's not a manager. If they're a manager, they should have it, but if not, don't give it to them. Give them the least amount of control that they need. This way, if something does happen, if they do get social engineered, they're not going to give away the farm. They can only deal with that little bit that they have. So we want to make sure we use those access lists. Network access control, same thing. Limit who can do. So someone in HR should not be able to look at someone in marketing documents. So we want to make sure we limit that. We want to make sure our wireless LANs are protected. Single sign-on is a great thing to help us do our job, but it comes at a risk that they only have to log in once. In Chapter 1, we talked about multi-factor identification. Well, that's becoming a big thing. As you know, Cumberland just implemented that. There's a reason for that we want to follow that. It makes it more secure. What are the business needs? What are the challenges from a business keeping the business up and running from an IT point of view? Well, we got to have access. We got to have computers. We got to have everything available when they need it. What is it designed? So we're going to look into that a little bit. We covered that. Identify management and access control. What are we looking at as far as what is our management? What do they need access to? What is the size of our staff that we need to be covering? When we do system implementation, we look at the system development life cycle. Multi-layered access control, we wanted to look at that and how did that affect everything that we were looking at. So how do we protect our data? Well, as we learned, encryption is one of the best things, but it comes at a cost. How do we have control lists for our file system? We want to protect our data. We have data in motion, data at rest. So we want to make sure that we know the difference in how to protect it. Data at rest is one of the easiest, sitting on our server or hard drive. Well, if we encrypt it, it's useless to anyone. So these are some of the different things we want to make sure. Are we protecting against executables, workstation servers? So these are some of the things we looked at also. Then we looked at physical security, securing the building. Is it a wide open area? Do we have cameras? Do we have lights? Is it guarded? Do we have guards on site? Security systems. Do we have to use badges to get into the system? Is anyone allowed to roam without being escorted? So these are some of the big things that we have to look at. We also looked at, does it make sense to have a third party do the building security? In some cases, yes. Especially if we're not, and who's responsible for it? Well, if we're renting a building, it's the building owner who's responsible. If we own the building, it becomes our responsibility, and we have to decide if that's something that we want to invest in, or do we want to have a third party do it. The advantage of a third party is that they are experts at it. The disadvantage, we don't know who they hire. So these are some of the things that we got to keep in mind when we're looking at physical security. And as you know, mobile is a remote worker. It's a huge issue right now. How do we make sure that the person on the other end is who they say they are? Well, one way is authentication factors. They have to use their login and password, and they get a message on their phone. In the past, it was tokens, but now everyone has a smartphone. You're going to see more and more of that. A couple of the schools I work for are implementing that now. VPNs for transmitting data. We have a VPN that we can put in, and that helps prevent anyone from getting our data while it's in motion. So these are some of the things that we want to look at, that we examined in our class. We spent a day on encryption, public key, infrastructure. What is that? What is encryption? Encryption's been around for over 2,000 years. It's not new. It is now harder and harder for this. Cryptology is something that companies are using. Every time you go on a website and it has an HTTPS, it's secure. Well, that tells me it's encrypted, that no one can read that data that's being sent when you hit the send button. Encryption's a nice, easy thing. It uses algorithms, and we have that available to us. We can also use encryption, a hash. If you remember, we talked about that. And that allows us to make sure we can use that for digital signatures to make sure the document was unaltered. And that's a big part of what we want. Part of the whole digital scene is, how do we know they didn't change anything? Well, we run a hash on it before we send it. When we get it back, it is hashed again, and it should be identical. So this hashing is a great way, and that's part of the encryption process. And we looked at testing. We have unit testing, integration testing. Testing's a big part of our system. We have the system development life cycle. It's a 7-step waterfall effect, and that helps us when we're doing our programming, implementing any new systems. We follow a system. When we follow a system, we know it's going to be correct, and so we use that. We also have a system for testing security. We might do penetration testing as we're going to get into this. Handling that testing is a big part of it. We do unit testing to make sure what they built works, and we integrate it, make sure it works within our major system. So these are some of the different things. What is assurance? Well, these are the practices, the checks and balances to make sure everything is up to date and everything is working correctly. That we have management and control, audit trails. The systems generate, most of our systems are automatically generated audit trails. Do we follow them? Do we look at them periodically? So these are the things that we want to look at. We looked at the different laws. Federal government has a bunch of laws that if you're within a specific industry, if you're in healthcare, you better be following HIPAA. If you're in the finance, you're following the Graham-Leach-Bealey Act. So it depends on the law, what your industry in, but there's laws. Doesn't matter if you can't claim you don't know the law. You're responsible, especially if you're IIT. You're responsible to make sure that you build systems that comply with the law. On top of federal laws, there's state laws we need to comply with also. So you need to understand what your state, federal, and state laws are in order to build your system correctly. Then the last system we looked at was security breaches. They're going to happen. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What kind of controls do we have in place to deter them? There's actually laws in there defining what we have to do if we have a security breach and what we must and what we should do. And we have to follow those laws. It's also part of the laws are we do every effort to make sure that we don't get a security breach, that we protect our customers' data, we protect our systems. If we get a breach, well, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to inform our customers, our employees? What's our liability to pay them for damages? If it's something, if you look at what's happened with Target and Yahoo, they lost significant business because of their breaches. So keeping the breaches from happening is our first step, what we need to do. Once they occur, well, how long did it go? And then how long did we go before we prevented them from being that? And then when did we identify what happened? So these are some of the different things that we looked at during our class. So I hope you learned something about access control and that how would you implement this in the workplace. I know that was part of your practical evaluation, communication, whatever it was called, practical paper you had to write. But access control gets often overlooked in many aspects of the IT world because it's incorporated in other areas. But it is something that is vital to protect our data, protect our company secrets, our government secrets, protect our employees, and most importantly, it protects our customers. And that is what everything's about. Without customers, it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to stay in business that long. So we have to make sure that we protect our customers' data. And if something does happen, what do we do about telling them and preventing it from happening again? And it could be better firewalls, more training of employees to ensure social engineering doesn't happen. It could be better encryption. We might want to include encryption more in our process. But it comes down to training. Training is probably the key for most businesses. We can spend the money on the hardware and software and prevent out the professional hacker, but the social engineering is something that we have to still work on. That's going to come from training. Thank you.